In this video, I'm going to share with you why I purchased this 50-watt Chinese laser off of eBay, setup and cost breakdown for all of my upgrades, and a quick tutorial on how to make a cheap wheeled stand for this machine. For those of you familiar with my previous videos, you guys know that I use a 3D printer to make a lot of gaming aids and terrain for my tabletop miniature games. And whenever I was looking for files on Thingiverse, I would always run across these laser files that were also on there. And every time I saw those, I was like, wow, those look really cool. I wish I had a laser. And a couple of years ago, I was aware of the Glowforge Kickstarter. And at that time, I had asked two of my other friends to split the cost of going in on one together and splitting it 3 ways. But they ended up declining, so I didn't end up getting a laser. But that sort of planted the seed for me always wanting to get one. And so I started saving up money, and after a year and a half, I finally saved up enough to buy the basic Glowforge, which cost $2,500. So I managed to save up that amount of money and was intending on purchasing that. But about a month and a half ago, I started doing research and found that it was a better deal to grab one of these 50-watt lasers instead. And I'm going to do a whole other video that goes into how I made that comparison and why I ended up choosing this 50-watt over the Glowforge. So make sure that you subscribe. When that video comes out, you can see that as well. So even though I can make a lot of things on my 3D printer, there are just some things that a laser can do that is much more efficient and much faster than a 3D printer. So just by way of comparison, if you take a look at this 3D printed card box that I made for Madara, this simple card box took over 3 hours to print on my 3D printer using the lowest resolution setting. Now, by way of comparison, with the laser, I'm able to make the same box where it actually takes less than 4 minutes to laser cut all of the pieces for this, and then took me less than 10 minutes to glue these pieces together. So in the span of less than 15 minutes, I was able to create this card box, which is even a little bit taller than the original. And so much more quicker to make some things. Obviously things with flat sides like this, using this 1/8 inch plywood. There's a lot of resources that really helped me out a lot in making the decision on what kind of laser to buy, and a lot of advice as well. I'm going to have a lot of links in the descriptions below, so make sure you check out those links to some of my favorite YouTube videos that were really helpful for me. And I wanted to call out a Facebook page actually called New to Laser Engraving. And it was there that I asked a ton of questions of other people who were in the same boat as myself and received some expert advice that was helpful. So make sure you check them out as well. Also, if you are just brand new and starting out, make sure you check out this video, my favorite one, that goes through some of the options that are available out there. One of the first things you do have to know when you do buy one of the Chinese lasers off of eBay, that whatever they state is the wattage amount actually isn't accurate. And so when I bought this Chinese laser, it was listed as a 50-watt Chinese laser, and these are also known as blue and whites because obviously they're blue and white. The laser itself is actually a 40-watt laser that they ship with the unit. Also, this is true if you buy a 40-watt laser, commonly known as a K40. It's not a 40-watt laser that's in there, it's a 30-watt. So just take whatever wattage that they are listing on their site and just reduce it by 10 watts, and that's more accurate to the laser tube that you're going to be receiving. Now, the reason why I opted for the 50-watt laser is because this was the largest machine that I knew I could bring down into my basement, which is where it's at right now. I would have gone for the larger 60-watt laser, but there was no way that it was going to fit down my staircase, and so this was the largest machine that you could get. So one of the first things that you want to decide is try to get the largest machine possible, because that's going to determine the bed size and how much material that you're going to be able to fit down in there. So for the 50-watt, I have a bed size of 12 inches by 20, and also I wanted to be able to use a rotary to be able to engrave on cups as well. And so this gave me the size to be able to do both of those things. So start off with your bed size that you need and your requirements and go from there. Also, my original plan was to get the 60-watt and put it in my garage. But one of the things that I quickly learned is that the laser gets hot and therefore needs water cooling. And Here where I live in Missouri, we have over 100-degree summers as well as single-digit winters. So trying to manage the temperature and the coolant was going to be hard inside of my garage, and that's why I ended up bringing it down into my basement. So let's go ahead and go into pricing. So I bought my 50-watt laser on eBay for $1,430. And make sure that you get one with a Ruida controller. That's super important. And also I opted to get the rotary included. I also purchased the LTL shipping, even though shipping is free on this, unless you have a truck and you can go to the warehouse where they're going to bring it into your city and pick it up and transport it to your home. I don't have a truck, and so I needed special delivery from a truck to bring it here and then lower it down on a lift gate, and I paid another $150 for that. This is important. When it arrives to your house, make sure you do an inspection of the crate that it comes in, because if there's any damage, you want to mark that on the invoice before you sign off on it. If there's any damage to the machine on the inside, then there can be a claim made for damage done during shipping. But I received mine with no damage on the outside crate, and they were able to leave after I signed off the invoice. I used some tools to uncrate it, and after it was uncrated, I lost probably 5 pounds, sweating like crazy with my son carefully bringing down the machine into the basement. These things are really heavy, close to 200 pounds, and so you definitely need help transporting it to wherever it's going to end up residing. And thank goodness that I already had built the table with the wheels on it, so that once we got it downstairs, we were able to put it directly onto the base and wheel it the rest of the way. So make sure you do make the base before it arrives, because it'll make transport that much easier. You only need to make the base for specifically the 50 watt, because 60 watt and above will come with its own base with wheels already. And then the K40 is small enough that you can just put it onto a desk. The total cost for my cart was $40, and that includes the $17 where I purchased the casters or the wheels off of Amazon. And again, links in the descriptions below for everything I mentioned today. The other thing that I made while I was waiting for the shipment of my machine was to create the exhaust for the machine. And this is super important. You need to have really good exhaust to pull away any of the smoke, or even worse, if you're going to be lasering acrylic like I am, there's poisonous gases that you don't want to be lingering inside. I invested the money to create an exhaust system using actually drainage pipe, PVC drainage pipe, and all of the piping cost me $167. You can probably have that amount if you go with standard HVAC metal sheeting, but I opted for the PVC because it was a lot easier for me to cut and to assemble. And then I also purchased the AC Infinity S6. This is a much more powerful fan than what comes stock, and in fact, after I received the machine, I completely removed the stock fan that was inside of the machine, threw it away, and am using my AC Infinity instead to pull out all of the air and send it outside. The AC Infinity costs $109. So once it was in place, I took off all of the cellophane and was able to inspect everything to make sure that it was working. And right away I noticed that my laser tube was actually broken. Everything else ended up working, and I tried out the air pump, I tried out the water pump, and even the main switch for the machine. To be honest, I was not super disappointed that my laser tube was broken. After reporting to the eBay seller, they were gracious enough to give me a $130 credit, because that's how much it costs to replace the laser tube for the 50 watt. Again, it's actually a 40 watt laser tube. So I used that instead of buying another 40 watt. I upgraded my machine to a 60 watt laser. I bought this from Light Object, and it cost me, with shipping, $355. By upgrading the laser tube to 60 watt, I also needed to upgrade my power supply. So I purchased a 60 watt power supply, and that cost me $160. Honestly, if my tube wasn't broken, this is an upgrade that I would have done later on down the line. Typical laser tube lasts about a year, up to 3 years, and I just would have waited until the laser tube needed to be replaced to make this upgrade to 60 watt. But because my machine came with it broken, I decided to go ahead and make that upgrade now. But that's a significant cost, and so you might choose to delay that or not do that at all, because a 40-watt laser tube can do anything that a 60-watt can do. It'll just be slower or need multiple passes for cuts. Also, one of the things that you can notice here on my machine is that when you do upgrade, the tube is going to be longer. So these machines actually come with a cutout, knowing that most people are going to upgrade their tubes. And so that's super convenient. And I also ended up needing to modify some of the STL files that I found on Thingiverse for mounting the larger tube. And if you purchase the same kind of machine that I do, again, check the links below for my Thingiverse files, because I uploaded it for other people to be able to use. I also bought a $9 milliamp meter, and that was just to be able to make sure that I wasn't using too much power on the tube, because that will significantly decrease the life of the laser tube. And so the milliamp meter is just a way for me to know how much power is actually being drawn. And typically you want to keep your tube running at 80% or less capacity. You don't have to get the milliamp meter. You can just use your laser software and keep the machine running at 80% or less. Speaking of software, I did purchase Lightburn, which is one of the more popular softwares that actually takes your vector files and transfers it over to the machine. There's a free trial version for 30 days, but after that you have to pay $80 in order to purchase the software. And that's what I did. Also, you're going to need a separate software program that can work and create vector files. The most popular one is Adobe Illustrator. There's CorelDRAW as well, but both of those programs are fairly expensive. So I decided to go the free route, and I got Inkscape, which you can download. I also did purchase Lightburn's camera and mounted this into the inside lid of my machine. This is really handy because it works seamlessly with the software to show you what you're cutting on your machine. This cost $83. Another upgrade that I made was I purchased a 2.5-inch focal length lens, because the lens that comes with the machine has a focal length of about 1 inch. And the shorter focal length lenses are good for engraving, but I knew a lot of what I was going to be doing was actually cutting material, and the lenses that have longer focal lengths are better at cutting. That's why I spent the $25 to get another lens. Finally, I spent another $70 in miscellaneous items. This includes a USB extension cable so that I could connect this machine to my computer that's over there on the other side of the room. Replacement tubing for both the air hose as well as the water cooling hoses, because the one I received with the machine was all kinked up. The plastic container to hold the water for the cooling system, as well as 5 gallons of distilled water. That amount also includes some tools that I had to purchase. One was the hole saw to install my milliamp. Another was a step drill to drill holes inside of steel. And then finally, I bought a plywood saw blade for my table saw. So that brings my grand total to $2,557.92. Obviously, the biggest upgrade was going up to the 60-watt system. If you want to go the cheapest possible route, here are my suggestions for what are essential add-ons, and that keeps the price at around $1,900. Now, what are the purchases that I did not make? So the first thing is I did not purchase a chiller. So the cooling system that comes with this is basically just a water pump. You can buy a chiller, which is basically a refrigerator that sends cold water and will cool off the water that's going through the coolant system. The reason why I didn't go for that is because one costs about $400. I just plan on throwing in some ice packs into my plastic container to keep the water cool, and I'm not running the system as a business, and so the laser isn't going to be running constantly, and that's where you're going to get overheating. The other thing I've opted not to buy is a $45 honeycomb bed. One of the things that happens is if you cut through material with the material straight on the steel bed that comes with this machine, what happens is that the laser reflects and bounces off of that sheet and will scorch the underside of your material. So it's good to lift up the material that you're cutting away from the bed to avoid that. So many people will opt to buy one of these honeycomb beds so that it lifts it off the machine. But there's a lot of disadvantages. The primary one being that it restricts airflow, because you want to be able to, again, with that exhaust system, pull away all of the toxic fumes that are coming from burning this material. And having that honeycomb actually traps the air underneath. So I'm looking at other options right now. In the meantime, I'm just using wood 2x3s as a temporary solution until I can figure out something with metal, because the laser can't cut metal. One of the suggestions that I received from a friend was to use angled aluminum, so that might be a longer term solution. Another thing obviously that I didn't purchase was a dedicated or better rotary. This is the rotary that comes with the machine, and it's relatively cheap. And this is because I only plan on doing a couple of cups or tumblers, but if you're going to be doing a lot of them, then I would suggest foregoing purchasing a machine with this included and buying one separately that is higher quality, and it's going to cost about $150 to $200. Now, I didn't do any pricing for any of the materials that we're cutting because it is so variable and everyone's going to be cutting different material. But just straight off the bat, I just want to say that I found this 1/8 inch plywood at Home Depot, and it costs only $11 for a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet. And I just ran it through my table saw to cut them down to my bed size, which again is 20 inches by 12 inches. And that makes each one of these sheets about 60 cents, which is great. Hopefully that's helpful for you. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, as I'll be coming out with more videos regarding the projects that I'm going to be making with my laser. And as always, check out my Patreon page to see what the GGGG is for this month. For the month of September 2020, we are giving away a Dungeons and Lasers Fantasy Dungeon core set, along with Legacy stretch goals, and then another patron supporter will be chosen to receive Durkar the Dragon. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check that out here. Otherwise, stick around and I'll show you how to make this cart. First thing you want to do is go into the descriptions below and download this shop and cut list, and make all of your cuts following the cut list. I don't have a working bench, and so I basically use my driveway floor as my workbench. And then I use pretty much 2-inch screws in order to put the frame together. And I do pre-drill the holes. After making this video, I did purchase an impact driver, which makes putting in screws a lot easier. But you can definitely just use your regular drill here if you want. And make sure you use a square so that your corners are all square. So I make both of my ends first. And that's why I'm spending so much time making sure all of the corners are square before screwing them in. And the reason why I have 2x3s as most of the frame rather than 2x4s is because the 2x3s is giving you enough dimensional stability, and yet at the same time saving you an inch of space. So for the most part, I think 2x3s work really well, but obviously you can use 2x4s if you don't have 2x3s in your area. And so I put in one of the cross pieces in one of the side sections first before putting it in on the other side. And I did pre-drill the holes on these cross pieces before putting these things together. Once that's done, go ahead and flip it over and put on the other 2 cross pieces. mark the center of the cross pieces because you want to put that extra support in the middle for the table. Once that's done, go ahead and affix your flat pieces. Now I'm going to take these off because it's lighter for me to carry the frame into my basement, and I'm going to attach the boards on top later. Here are the casters that I ordered off of Amazon. Again, look in the links below. And it's fairly easy to screw each one of these in on the 4 corners. So flip your frame upside down before screwing these in. And I'm using 1.25 inch wood screws for this. Now I'm putting on the bottom and top boards, and again using the 1.25 inch, I did pre-drill holes as well so that they are countersunk. And that is pretty much it. You have your functioning table. Hopefully that was helpful, and we will see you next time.